28 years ago, John and Patsy Ramsey woke up the day after Christmas and realized their 6-year-old daughter, JonBenét, a child beauty queen, was missing. A threatening handwritten ransom note demanding $118,000, the exact amount of John's bonus.
During the recent reinvestigation, unseen footage and photos of JonBenét Ramsey have surfaced, revealing a side of the tragedy the world never witnessed.
Dozens of items collected in the JonBenét Ramsey case are now being tested for DNA. This is part of a renewed effort to find the 6-year-old's killer.
Beyond the headlines and pageant smiles, these images capture the haunting aftermath, the fear, chaos, and heartbreak that gripped her family. For decades, the public saw only fragments. Now, the hidden moments expose a deeper, more unsettling reality that changes how we remember that fateful winter morning. A nightmare after Christmas. December 26, 1996, turned into one of the most disturbing crime scenes in American history. Before sunrise, 6-year-old JonBenét Ramsey was already gone, though no one understood it yet. Her mother, Patsy Ramsey, woke up and discovered her daughter was missing. Panic took over the moment she saw that JonBenét was not in her bed. Patsy dialed 911 and made a frantic call, her voice trembling as she begged for help.
We have a kidnapping. Hurry, please. Explain to me what's going on. Are you Patsy Ramsey? I'm the mother. Oh my God! Please.
While police officers rushed toward the house, another strange detail appeared. On the staircase sat a ransom note. It was long and handwritten. It demanded exactly $118,000 to get JonBenét back. The amount was unusual because it matched the bonus John Ramsey had reportedly received from his company that year. This detail alone set off confusion and suspicion among investigators, neighbors, and soon the entire country. Police arrived expecting a kidnapping. They did not expect what they would find later in the day. Because they believed JonBenét had been taken, they allowed friends and family to move through many rooms in the house. People tried to comfort the Ramseys. They stood in the kitchen. They walked into the living room. They touched things without knowing what they were disturbing. Critical pieces of evidence were quietly destroyed simply because no one realized the truth that lay beneath their feet. For hours, the basement remained untouched. Officers did not search it with urgency because they feared the kidnapper might be nearby or watching. The living area upstairs was filled with whispers, theories, and fear. Patsy cried uncontrollably. John Ramsey tried to stay calm while supporting his wife. Detectives attempted to hold the situation together, but the early hours became a blur of confusion. It was John who finally went down to the basement later that day. What he found there froze time itself. Lying on the cold floor in a small room was JonBenét. She had been bound. Duct tape covered her mouth. A strangling device had been made from part of a paintbrush. Her father picked up her body in shock, an action that would also alter the crime scene forever. JonBenét had not been kidnapped. She had been murdered inside her own home. The autopsy later confirmed the brutality she suffered. The official cause of death was asphyxia by strangulation paired with a severe head injury. The medical examiner noted marks on her body and signs of a struggle. What had happened in that basement was painful, violent, and swift. Investigators were left with two possibilities. Either someone had entered the Ramsey home unnoticed, or the killer had been inside all along. As soon as the truth became public, the media descended on the Ramsey family with overwhelming force. Newspapers and television channels across the country were raced to cover every detail. The family was wealthy. JonBenét had been a child beauty pageant contestant whose pictures and videos were already public. These elements turned the tragedy into a national obsession. People wanted answers. Reporters wanted a villain. Rumors spread faster than evidence. Every movement of the Ramsey family was captured and dissected. The investigation began to crumble under the weight of mistakes. Key areas of the home had been touched by many people. Potential evidence had been stepped on, moved, or wiped away. The ransom note created confusion. Experts could not agree on who wrote it. Fingerprints were blurred. Time was lost. The police and the district attorney disagreed about the direction of the case. The public became divided. Some blamed strangers. Some blamed someone closer. No theory felt complete. As the months passed, the case only grew darker. The world watched as the Ramseys appeared in interviews trying to defend themselves. Detectives followed tip after tip, often hitting dead ends. Nothing seemed to bring them closer to the truth. The crime scene had been damaged beyond repair. What happened in those first chaotic hours shaped the entire investigation and possibly the future of the case forever. Yet in the chaos of that first night, the real horror was only just beginning. And over the years, what was left behind in that basement would change everything no one expected. The DNA no one matched. During the investigation, one thing refused to disappear. It was a silent clue left behind by the killer. It sat on fibers, on fabric, and under a child's fingernails. This clue was the only thing that did not lie. It was the DNA. From the earliest days of the investigation, forensic teams found trace amounts of male DNA on JonBenét's clothing. It appeared in her underwear. It appeared under her fingernails. The samples were tiny, so small that early technology struggled to read them well. In the late 1990s, DNA testing was still growing. It gave hints, but not complete answers. Each new test confirmed the same thing. A man had left his biological signature on JonBenét, but who he was remained a mystery. Years passed, the case grew colder, yet the DNA refused to fade away. It stayed inside sealed evidence boxes, waiting for better tools to arrive. When the technology finally caught up, investigators brought in Parabon Nanolabs. This company specializes in studying old samples and reading them in ways earlier labs could not. Their work opened a door that had been locked for decades. Using advanced techniques, they traced the DNA back to distant relatives of the unknown man. This discovery created an entirely new path. Investigators built long and detailed family trees. They studied relatives on both sides of the man's ancestry and traced the branches back through time. Some relatives did not even know each other. Others were scattered across the country. Slowly, the picture sharpened and pointed to a man who had been 34 years old in 1996 and who had lived only 2 miles from the Ramsey home. This alone shook the investigation. For years, suspicion had focused heavily on the Ramsey family, but the DNA changed everything. It did not match John Ramsey. It did not match Patsy Ramsey. It did not match their son, Burke. In 2008, District Attorney Mary Lacey issued a formal statement clearing all 3 members of the Ramsey family. She explained that the DNA on JonBenét's clothing belonged to an unidentified male, someone from outside the family. She said that the evidence strongly supported the belief that an intruder had been inside the house that night. Even so, many questions remained. Some parts of the evidence had never been fully explored. The strangling device made from a paintbrush handle and a cord was one of the most important items in the case. The duct tape found on JonBenét's mouth was another. Her underwear and long johns carried tiny but meaningful traces. Investigators agreed that these items were essential. Yet over the years, some of them were tested and some were not. A few pieces had been handled so many times during the chaotic early hours that they became less reliable. The Boulder Police Department responded by saying they are not ignoring any evidence. They have repeated many times that they are working with new forensic techniques and reviewing every piece that could still provide information. They insist that the investigation is active and that they examine new technology each year as it becomes available. Still, the case remains unsolved, and the unknown man behind the DNA remains hidden in the shadows. The trace left on JonBenét told investigators one thing with absolute certainty. The killer was not a familiar face. He was someone who moved quietly, someone who slipped into a home on a winter night and left without a sound. For many years, people argued about what happened, but the DNA pointed in a direction few wanted to face. With this unidentified male DNA, investigators realized they were dealing not with a familiar face, but with someone who had stayed deeply hidden, and someone few dared to imagine. When technology finally caught up. When forensic science entered a new era, it came with a powerful tool known as genetic genealogy. This method did something remarkable. Instead of searching for a perfect one-to-one DNA match, investigators could compare unknown DNA to millions of people in public ancestry databases. They could identify distant relatives of a mystery suspect. They could map out entire family trees. With enough work, they could narrow a suspect list from thousands of people to one. This breakthrough brought new hope to countless cold cases. Names once buried in old files were suddenly matched to criminals who thought they had escaped forever. Across the country, detectives began solving cases from the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, using methods that had not existed back then. Each new success raised a haunting question. Could the same thing finally unlock the secrets of the Ramsey case? John Ramsey has been one of the loudest voices calling for new testing. He has appeared in interviews explaining that modern technology has improved unbelievably. In his view, science today could do what the early investigators could not. It could read the smallest fragments of DNA. It could separate mixed samples more cleanly. It could build a profile from a single trace that earlier machines would have ignored. He believes the answers are sitting in evidence boxes waiting for modern eyes and modern tools. Pressure continued to grow as experts called for deeper analysis. And in December 2023, the Boulder Police Department made a significant announcement. They had formed a Colorado cold case review team created not just from local investigators, but outside specialists with fresh perspectives. The team met to examine the evidence, review the history of the case, and recommend the most advanced forensic methods available today. This move signaled something important. It showed that the department was willing to step beyond old boundaries. They wanted new ideas. They wanted to consider tools that did not exist in 1996. But even with this progress, officials made one thing clear. Not all recommendations or testing steps would be made public. Some information was kept quiet to protect the investigation. Some details remained behind closed doors so that any potential suspect could not adapt or hide. Meanwhile, success stories from other cold case units added more pressure. Several departments around the country had partnered with Parabon Nanolabs. Using microscopic traces of DNA, Parabon had created genetic profiles, family trees, and even facial predictions. These portraits were not photographs. They were scientific estimations built entirely from DNA, yet many of them turned out to be accurate. Parabon's work helped identify killers in cases that had been unsolved for half a century. All of this stirred public hope. If other agencies could bring justice to families after so many years, why could the same not happen for JonBenét? If modern genealogy could solve some of the oldest mysteries in America, why could it not unravel the most famous cold case of them all? For the first time in a long time, the Ramsey case felt alive again. The evidence was old, but the technology was new. Machines now could detect what earlier labs would have missed. They could read tiny fragments of male DNA found on JonBenét's clothing, and perhaps even link them to living relatives. Every advancement carried a weight of possibility. Investigators studied each item that had once been touched in that basement. They re-examined fibers, clothing, and archived swabs with far more sensitive tools than ever before. Piece by piece, the truth seemed to move closer. Experts hoped that somewhere inside those samples was a clue that only modern science could reveal. As the experts re-examined the evidence, something remarkable surfaced from decades-old samples, a possibility nobody saw coming, and one that promised to rewrite everything. Footage, pageants, and family secrets. During recent reinvestigation, footage and photos came to the surface, revealing details the world had never seen with such clarity. Before her name became tied to one of America's most haunting mysteries, JonBenét Ramsey was known for something entirely different. She was a child beauty pageant contestant who stepped onto brightly lit stages wearing sparkling costumes, polished hair, and bright smiles. Her pictures showed her with perfect curls and makeup that made her look older than 6. To many people, she looked like a living doll. When the media captured her story after her death, these images became the center of attention. They appeared on front pages, television screens, and magazines. Her smiling face created a mix of fascination and discomfort across the country. The Ramseys were a wealthy family, and that wealth instantly intensified public interest. John Ramsey was a successful businessman. Their large Boulder home, still decorated for Christmas, became one of the most watched houses in America. Reporters stood outside. Cameras filmed neighbors walking by. Every corner of the home suddenly became a clue in the public's imagination. It was no longer seen as a private family residence. It became the front stage of a national tragedy. As months became years, public obsession only grew stronger. Documentaries, reenactments, and talk shows kept the case alive. Pageant videos of JonBenét smiling under bright lights were repeatedly shown next to footage of Patsy and John Ramsey speaking through tears. The contrast was painful. On one side, a joyful child full of life. On the other, a family crushed by grief, pressure, and suspicion. This cycle of images shaped how millions understood the case. The sweet Pageant child became frozen in time. The parents became permanent characters in a national debate that spun far beyond the facts. Because the case remained unsolved, people filled the gaps with their own theories. Some believed there was a dark secret inside a picture-perfect family. Others saw devastated parents trapped in a nightmare they couldn't escape. Few understood the full reality because the noise around the case grew louder than the truth. Newly released interviews and old recordings, cleaned with modern editing, pulled the case back into public view. One major project, a Netflix series titled Cold Case, Who Killed JonBenét Ramsey, re-examined the evidence with a modern lens. It didn't just revisit the crime scene, it showed the emotional collapse that followed. It revealed how the Ramseys battled not only unbearable grief, but also the crushing weight of being judged by an entire nation. These new documentaries brought forward forgotten clips. They exposed inconsistencies in early reporting. They showed the strain inside the Ramsey household and the difficulty of living under suspicion for years. This new wave of attention revealed another truth. The public had never truly understood the Ramseys. Their lives had been reduced to pageant videos, tearful press conferences, and endless speculation. For the first time in many years, people began to see the emotional layers hidden beneath those well-known images. But behind the glossy pageant photos and emotional interviews lay a reality far more fractured. And as new footage surfaced, it hinted at a deeper and far more disturbing truth. A botched scene, lost clues, and the intruder theory. What happened in the Ramsey home in the early hours of December 26 is now studied as one of the most damaging examples of how a crime scene can fall apart. From the moment officers stepped inside the large Boulder home, crucial mistakes were made. Instead of treating the space as a fragile and dangerous environment filled with invisible clues, investigators treated it like a normal house filled with concerned friends and family. People walked through rooms. Furniture was moved. Items were picked up and placed down again. Conversations echoed through hallways where evidence should have been protected. By the time experts realized how serious the situation was, much of the scene had already been disturbed. Some of the most important areas were never sealed off. The basement, the kitchen, and the staircase remained open to anyone who entered. The ransom note lay on the staircase, but the area around it was never properly guarded. Footprints and fibers that might have held answers were touched, covered, or ignored. Even the body of JonBenét was moved when John Ramsey discovered her, which erased valuable information about positioning and surrounding materials. These early hours changed the direction of the investigation forever. Then there were the strange details that deepened the mystery. The ransom note ended with the cryptic letters SBTC. To this day, no one has explained what they mean. Some believe the letters were a code chosen by the killer. Others think they point to a group that never existed. The note itself was unusually long and appeared to be written on paper inside the house. This alone created a storm of confusion. Why would a stranger stop to write such a long message? Why risk staying in the home? These questions fueled countless debates, but none of them brought investigators closer to a clear answer. Inside the house, police found more oddities. 2 sets of unidentified footprints were reported. A rope was discovered that was never fully examined with modern tools. The paintbrush that had been used to create the garrote was broken, but only part of it was found. The other part was missing and has never been recovered. Any one of these clues could have led investigators toward a suspect. Instead, they became fragments lost in the noise of a case that quickly spiraled beyond its own evidence. As these strange pieces piled up, a new idea began to grow. The intruder theory, once considered unlikely, started to look more believable. Former Boulder Police Chief Mark Beckner later stated publicly that he believed the unidentified male DNA found on JonBenét's clothing came from someone outside the Ramsey family. His belief echoed what forensic experts had been suggesting for years. The DNA did not match anyone in the house. It pointed outward to a stranger. Over time, the intruder theory grew stronger. Crime experts said that even though the scene had been mishandled, some elements still pointed to an outside presence. The unidentified footprints, the missing piece of the paintbrush, the unexplained rope, the strange signature on the ransom note and the foreign DNA all suggested that someone else had crossed into the Ramsey home that night. Someone who did not belong there. Someone who slipped through a window or door, carried out a terrible act, and vanished again. It became clearer that the greatest disruption may not have come from the family under the spotlight. The true danger might have come from the person who moved silently through the house while everyone slept. A person who left behind just enough to confuse investigators, but not enough to be caught. And as the years passed, many began to wonder whether the intruder had been watching long before that winter night. And yet, while many blamed the family, the true disruption might have come from someone who never belonged there. Someone who watched, waited, and struck. Grief, redemption, and the Ramsey legacy. Long after the cameras left their street and the reporters stopped shouting questions at their door, the Ramsey family faced a very different kind of battle. It was quiet, lonely, and far more painful than anything the public ever witnessed. Their tragedy did not end when the investigation faded. It lived inside their home, inside their memories, and inside every room that once held JonBenét's laughter. What the world saw was a famous mystery. What the Ramseys lived was constant grief. The person most shielded from the spotlight in those early years was Burke Ramsey. He was a child trying to understand what had happened to his sister while the world debated his family's innocence. For a long time, he stayed out of the public eye. He avoided interviews and rarely spoke about the case. But modern interviews eventually revealed the lifelong weight he had carried. Burke explained how deeply the suspicion affected him. He had to grow up hearing strangers accuse his family of terrible things. Even as an adult, he said he struggled with the shadows cast by those early days. What seemed like entertainment to many viewers was a nightmare he had never fully escaped. John Ramsey carried his own painful burden. He stood in front of cameras many times, not to defend himself, but to demand progress. He believed that somewhere in the evidence collected in 1996 was the key to the truth. He spoke repeatedly about the DNA found on the garrote, clothing, and other items. He insisted that these pieces needed to be tested again with modern tools. He said that science had become far more advanced and that the answers were still there waiting to be uncovered. His determination did not come from anger, but from a father's need to bring justice to the daughter he had lost. Patsy Ramsey never lived to see the family officially cleared. She passed away in 2006 after years of battling illness and public judgment. Her grief had been heavily documented on television screens. Many people criticized her appearance, her pageant experience with JonBenét, and even her tone during interviews. These judgments were harsh and often cruel. The Ramseys became symbols for whatever theory a viewer chose to believe. Some saw them as victims, others saw them as suspects. Every misunderstanding was repeated for years on television and in tabloids. The damage to the family's reputation was enormous. Television specials pushed conspiracies for ratings. Rumors spread faster than facts. Some documentaries portrayed the Ramseys as suspicious even when evidence suggested otherwise. They were attacked in magazines and mocked in late-night comedy. Every attempt to clear their name felt drowned out by people who preferred sensational stories. Although they were officially cleared in 2008, they often said they never felt cleared in the court of public opinion. The label placed on them in 1996 never fully washed away. Their legacy became something larger than their grief. It became a lesson in how quickly public judgment can twist a tragedy. It became a reminder that behind every headline is a family trying to survive. And it became a call for justice that refuses to fade. Revelations, controversies, and the path ahead. In the months after JonBenét Ramsey's death, something equally chilling occurred just a few blocks away. Another young girl was attacked in her bedroom. The intruder entered silently, assaulted her, and then escaped by leaping from a balcony into the darkness. The two girls were connected through the same dance school. They had performed on the same stage, shared classes, and lived in the same quiet Boulder neighborhood. What had once seemed safe now became a place of fear, suspicion, and unanswered questions. Despite the eerie similarities, the connection between the two cases was never fully explored. Experts point out that this was a critical missed opportunity. The rope used in the second attack was never compared to the bindings in JonBenét's case. Fibers, footprints, and knot patterns were ignored, leaving investigators with a gap in potential links. Bed sheets from the second girl's bedroom which could have contained crucial DNA evidence, were discarded before modern DNA techniques were available. Forensic expert Dr. Henry Lee called this a devastating error, explaining that even decades later, small samples could have provided a usable DNA profile with today's technology. He said, "We should test again for DNA that can shed some light on the whole case." By 2008, the legal system formally cleared the Ramseys and concluded that John, Patsy, and Burke Ramsey were no longer suspects. Attorney emphasized that unexplained male DNA found on JonBenét made it clear the perpetrator was unknown and outside the family. She wrote, "There is no innocent explanation for its incriminating presence. It is the profile of the perpetrator of this murder." While the official verdict removed suspicion, public opinion had already left permanent scars. Years of media scrutiny, conspiracy theories, and relentless speculation had tarnished the family's reputation. Criminal psychologist Dr. Catherine Ramsland notes that even when legally cleared, families in cases like this often carry the weight of public judgment for decades. In 2023 and 2024, though, the Boulder Police Department formalized the Cold Case Review Team. The team included forensic scientists, DNA experts, and criminal profilers. Their goal was to recommend new testing methods and re-examine key evidence using the most advanced technology available. Forensic scientist Dr. Angela Williamson emphasized the potential of these advances, explaining that even tiny traces of DNA left on JonBenét's clothing, underwear, or long johns could now provide significant leads. Genetic genealogy allows investigators to trace distant relatives of unknown DNA contributors, opening the possibility of identifying the killer even decades later. Experts caution that DNA alone cannot automatically prove guilt. Dr. Lee highlighted that many times DNA does not prove somebody guilty or innocent. Where the DNA was from and how it was transferred must be considered. You have to put all the pieces together. Michael Baden, a forensic pathologist, added that trace DNA can sometimes appear innocently, transferred through everyday contact. Still, multiple experts, including former FBI profiler John Douglas and trace evidence specialist Skip Palahniuk, have pointed to the unidentified male DNA as the clearest indication that someone outside the family committed the crime. Candace DeLong, a former FBI profiler, stated, "The DNA belongs to the killer. It shows up identically in several different places on multiple surfaces." Despite the renewed attention, no suspect has been charged. The case remains open, and decades-old DNA and genealogical evidence offer a rare second chance. Every fragment of biological material, every overlooked fiber, and every forgotten clue could now help reveal the truth. The experts agree that combining modern science, detailed investigation, and methodical interpretation could finally uncover what was missed the first time. For nearly 30 years, the case has haunted a family, a city, and a nation. Media narratives, public suspicion, and investigative missteps shaped its legacy. Now, the convergence of new forensic technology, cold case expertise, and renewed public attention brings the possibility of resolution. Experts warn that even with the most advanced tools, solving a case of this complexity requires patience and careful analysis, but the potential for breakthrough has never been higher. With nearly 3 decades of evidence and expert knowledge behind them, investigators may finally see the pieces fall into place. Every trace of DNA, every fiber, and every overlooked clue could converge, pointing to a truth far more shocking than anyone imagined. As Boulder waits, the hope that the mystery of JonBenét Ramsey might finally be solved remains alive, and the promise of justice, long delayed, shines brighter than ever. What do you think really happened that night in Boulder? Share your thoughts and theories in the comments below.